Good evening friends, you are most welcome to Civil Affairs channel. Today we are going to discuss Social Anthropology by MAAN IGNOU and our topic is Comparative Ethnography MAAN 003 Development. Here we will discuss developmental anthropology, in which we will discuss theoretical part of which the ethnography, capitalism, primitive and modern. Some aspects of Tolai economic growth is an example. This work is an example of the studies of change. One of the major criticism of the functional approach was that it was unable to account for change, and this led to a particular concept about communities that they were changeless. In reality, it was not so. The focus thus shifted from the study of society as an order whole to how it was changing over time. Description of the ethnography. This book is about the Tolai, a Melanesian people living on the Gazelle Peninsula of New Britain to the northeast of the mainland of the New Guinea. The Tolai are reported to have been cannibals until about the end of the last century, yet nowadays they are regarded as one of the most sophisticated and advanced people of the whole of the territory of Papua New Guinea. This study revealed many interesting aspects in the economic life and development of these people, some of which have an interest and significance which goes far beyond the affairs of the Tolai people and those immediately concerned with them. The purpose of this book is to describe and discuss these aspects of Tolai economic development and to analyze the general theoretical implications which emerge. At the end of the 19th century, the Tolai were technologically still extremely primitive. They used sharp pieces of bamboo, stone axes, and pointed sticks as their main tools. Yet, only 50 years later, they already owned a large number of motor vehicles as well as costly copra dryers and cocoa fermenteries. In terms of per capita cash income, however, the Tolai are still underdeveloped and poor. Intellectual context. In this book, the author has examined the forces which facilitated this comparatively rapid economic progress of the Tolai and the obstacles which have prevented an ever greater expansion as well as those which are likely to impede the path to future continuous economic growth. An attempt has made an attempt has been made to analyze the impact of economic change on the traditional Tolai social system, which aspects persisted and which aspects changed. The flexible social system operating with the monetized economy provided a fertile ground for economic development. In fact, it can be regarded as having been a system of primitive capitalism with great emphasis on thriftiness and accumulation of wealth rather than primitive communism without any concept of private property. Field work. This work was done by combining the typical anthropological fieldwork methods with the historical method. Anthropological fieldwork involved the use of the techniques of observation and interview. The impact of Europeans on the lives of the people was studied using archival method. Analysis of data. The data was analyzed using the methods of qualitative research. The impact of Europeans on the Tolai economic life. The impact of European contact on Tolai economic life meant a widening of the market. Foreign traders were keen to acquire coconuts and labor, and the innovation of the new capitals as well as consumer goods. By 1960, the Tolai had passed through four distinct phases in their economic progress. In the transition period, they got the first glimpse of the new tools and the goods made available by the traders either in exchange for Tolai coconuts or labor or both. During the second phase, the agricultural investment period, they rapidly extended their coconut plantings. They also increased their production of food crops to supply foreign settlers as well as the growing non-Tolai native labor force. On the expatriate plantations in the area. This increase in the production resulted in a considerable addition to Tolai income. However, since their consumption did not increase in proportion to their income, they began to look around for profitable investment opportunities for their accumulated cash resources. Consequently, they entered their investment trial period, during which they experimented with enterprises in the sphere of agricultural processing, such as copra dryers, and servicing industries, such as transport and retail trade. As a result of their inexperience of organizing and operating enterprises, a high proportion of their initial ventures failed. However, they learned by their experience, and after World War II passed into the fourth phase of economic progress, the tertiary investment period, during which the number of Tolai who owned vehicles and retail stores grew considerably and the proportion of business failures was greatly reduced. However, even at this stage, agriculture still provided the basis to the economy. Economic change. In order to examine the economic change in a small scale society, the author has taken a big Tolai group, Rapitok, a frontier settlement, and discusses in detail the mutual interaction between traditional social organization and the new forces of change. The Rapitek population interacted with the wider economy. Administrative policy played an important part in shaping their economic progress, in that they followed the advance from the administration given since the last war and planted cocoa extensively. The development and profitability of transport and retail enterprises. Economic differentiation in Rapitok was expressed in terms of productive rather than non-productive assets, and the customary social differentiation between elders, middle farmers, and single man household reasserted itself under the new conditions. By examining by examining Rapitok's cash balance of payments, we see that its link with the wider economy is based largely on the export of cash crops, copra and cocoa. However, cash cropping did not make great demands on Rapitok's economic resources. Ample, highly fertile land was available, and subsistence as well as new cash crops needed little labor. New economic opportunity New economic opportunities did not therefore provide an alternative to customary behavior. Rather than Rather, the inhabitants could superimpose their new cash earnings activities on to their traditional life. New economic opportunities did not therefore provide an alternative to customary behavior. Rather, the inhabitants could superimpose their new cash earnings activities onto their traditional life. This in turn enabled their traditional social system to survive practically unimpaired by the new force of change. However, the increasing rate of cash crop expansion, coupled with a rapidly growing population, produced a scarcity of land more so each year. This began to undermine the traditional social organization. The existence of large capital assets such as trucks and copra dryers, as well as large areas under perennial cash crops, affected in particular the customary system of matrilineal inheritance. Conversely, matrilineal inheritance affected economic growth. Tolai Cocoa Project. The new council, which were empowered to levy rates and taxes, were keen to sponsor local economic development so as to help provide increasing prosperity. At that time, it was already clear that centrally controlled fermentaries were needed to make the cocoa enterprise a success. These two factors combined brought about the union between the new cocoa industry and the new council in the form of the Tolai Cocoa Project, which developed in three phases. First phase in 1951, after the series of meetings between the councils, leading growers and officers of the Departments of Agriculture and Native Affairs, it was decided that initially each council would appropriate funds for, from its revenue to construct fermentary units at strategic places in their areas and would further provide recoverable advances to enable each fermentary to start operating. First phase in 1951, after the series of meetings between the councils, leading growers and officers of the Department of Agriculture and Native Affairs, it was decided that initially each council would appropriate funds from its revenue to construct a fermentary units at strategic places in their areas and would further provide recoverable advances to enable each fermentary to start operating. Second phase, cocoa production increased rapidly in the early 1950s and more fermenting facilities were urgently required. Considerable capital investment beyond the revenue resources of the council was needed. Accordingly, the councils concerned applied to the administration for financial assistance. Third phase, even the expanded fermenting capacities proved unable to cope with their rapidly growing production. Consequently, in 1955, officers of the Department of Native Affairs and Agriculture set about carefully examining the whole cocoa industry, including the count of all native cocoa trees and an estimate of future wet bean production. The drift away from the project. In spite of its obvious usefulness, the project has had to face serious competition from European and Chinese traders ever since its inception. In order to protect their enterprise, the local government council ruled that it was illegal for any Tolai to sell cocoa outside the project. A number of Tolai were actually fined for offences under this rule. At the 29th meeting of the board, a motion was proposed by a leading Tolai and passed by a large majority that the minister be requested to bring the legislation to compel all Tolai people within council areas to take their wet beans to council fermentaries. However, the administration, in accordance with the policy of encouraging competitive enterprise in the territory, has not thought such protective legislation desirable or justifiable. The drift away from the project has taken on considerable proportions. A number of reasons are frequently advanced to account for the project's decreasing popularity. Some hold that Chinese traders nowadays offer illicit methylated spirit to Tolai who are attracted by this and consequently take their wet beans to traders rather than the project. Though this may be so, in a number of cases it cannot possibly account for the whole of the cocoa sales to independent traders, nor there can be regular theft of such large quantities that stolen cocoa can provide a major source of cocoa sold outside the project. Again, it was sometimes argued that the Tolai like to take their wet beans to Rabual whenever they want to make a purchase in order to have already cash available on the spot. Saturday is the day Saturday is the day on which most people make their way to Rabual to visit the market, yet none of the project fermentaries accepts wet beans at the weekend. In order to overcome this disadvantage, the project started a buying station at Rabual market. It operated for 3 months but was then discontinued because it was found uneconomic. What then may be deciding factor for so much cocoa being sold outside the project? This question has puzzled many of the people concerned. Some regard cocoa sales to Chinese traders as a sign of plain irrationality. Others attribute it to sheer contrariness. The most outspoken critics of irresponsible attitudes are some leading Tolai themselves. One of the most respected elders in the area encouraged his audience of cocoa growers to beat up anyone they found taking wet beans to traders rather than to the project. This might be taken to indicate that there was political opposition between supporters of the project and those who sell outside it, that the drift away from the fermentaries represented a breakaway political movement. However, while the project supporters openly declared their loyalty to the council fermentaries, those who sold their cocoa to traders almost always did so secretly. They collected their wet beans early in the morning and then took them to traders under shelters of darkness. There has as yet not been any overt movement of Tolai declaring openly that they wished to sell their cocoa outside their project. Matrilineal inheritance and cocoa sales. A considerable number of Rapitok men who have had their own matrilineage lands planted with cocoa by their sons wish to conceal this fact from their fellow parishioners. The Rapitok data clearly show that the complex pattern of landholding and inheritance constitutes the crux of the drift away from the project. There were no doubt a number of other contributory factors, yet none of these individual factors could possibly account for the increasing proportion of the cocoa sales to independent traders. The increasing drift away from the project was, in fact, largely a result of the difficulties arising from the introduction of perennial cash crops into a society with a traditional social system according to which inheritance followed the matrilineal line of descent, whereas residence was patrilineal. The rapid growth of population accompanied by extensive cash cropping accounted for the increasing demand and competition for land. Sons could no longer be accommodated in their father's parish according to the customary system of landholding unless they had claims to land there on the basis of their own descent groups. Conclusion. The Tolai case study illustrates the crucial part foreign contact, in particular a foreign administration, plays in the sphere of economic development of small scale societies, even with such favorable preconditions of growth as were found among the Tolai. Their economy remained stagnant until its growth potential was fertilized by the European contact. Though the people were quick to respond to new economic opportunities, they did not have the initiativeness to start new enterprises of their own accord. The shape and form of their development is entirely due to stimulus originating from outside rather than to spontaneous indigenous venture. At first, the German and subsequently the Australian administrator encouraged coconut planting. This ultimately resulted into an extensive copra production. The Japanese ordered rice cultivation. Therefore, rice was grown. Then immediately after World War II, the armies offered vehicle cheaply and the Tolai bought them. Since the last war, the Australian authorities in the area have sponsored the production of cocoa. Again, people followed the lead. The administration thus directly affects the pattern of indigenous economic growth apart from affecting it indirectly by providing education and other facilities. It is therefore the responsibility of the administration in underdeveloped societies to direct development in a way most beneficial to indigenous population. In doing this, officials may be well advised to bear certain consideration in mind. How does the ethnography advance our understanding? Change occurs when a community comes in contact with outside world. This ethnography advances our understanding of the situation of contact. Like in the Tolai case, the foreign administration played an important role in economic development till the time the external intervention was not there. The community was static. Contact with the outside world brings about transformative changes. Summary: both the ethnographies discussed in this unit show that people are not passive, they are also not tradition bound, they have a crucial look at the development measures and how they would benefit them. Thank you very much.